Let me tell you what my deep research and basically vision is.
I hope there's Bigfoot. I don't think there is.
I'm not telling you nothing.
The aliens won't let it happen.
Happening now, breaking.
Bernie Sanders is angry.
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
What are the tips? Give me some tips on how to work with Wes Anderson.
Be ready to speak very fast and very clearly, because that's definitely one key thing.
I will only tell the truth.
Until you and 6 kids you barely know in wet bathing suits have surrounded 9 chimpanzees outside of a Wendy's. You probably really don't know yourself, okay?
Yep. And we back.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to your new favorite podcast and the best in political, sports, and paranormal news coverage. I'm your host, Wes Anderson, and this is In the Shed. This is episode 006, so whether you're back for more or finding us for the first time this week, hey, thanks for tuning in. It's Friday, February 327th, or at least that's what it feels like to me, and I'm in a shed in the backyard of my home in Alabama, just so I can hang out with you tools and talk about the latest headlines, stories, and rumors in the world of politics, sports, and the paranormal. I'm so glad you're joining us. It's great to be in the shed. A lot of news to cover. It's going to be a great show. It's a beautiful day. The rain has stopped and the sun is out. Nice change of pace to cap off the week. This is our second time huddling together in the shed this week. As I said on episode 005, my recording the show last week was delayed by a bout with a particularly vicious stomach bug. It knocked me on my tail for a couple of days. I was out of commission. I haven't been that sick in a while. I'm glad it wasn't the Rona, but it still wasn't fun, and unfortunately that darn virus has made its way through our whole family now. It's been a long, hard week, man. One of those weeks you just have to survive and move on, you know? Let me tell you what happened. It was midweek, and I was finally starting to turn the corner toward wellness. My stomach had finally stopped sending everything upstream after a couple of days of volcanic activity. For the first time, I didn't feel like a team of tiny ninjas were roundhouse kicking me in the gut, and the head fog wasn't completely gone, but it was starting to clear. I still felt really weak. I had lost an Olympic swimming pool's worth of fluids, after all, but I was improving. The only bad thing was that I really needed rest, but since I had slept so much already that day, I was having a difficult time falling asleep. So I went to my cabinet, I popped an over-the-counter sleep aid, and I waited to be carried off into the realm of numbers and sheep. Now, no sooner had that first little lamb appeared over the horizon than my beautiful wife burst through the bedroom door to inform me that our little 4-year-old had just thrown up all over her room. The virus had claimed its second victim. Now, I have a strong stomach. It's something I pride myself on. It's a weird thing to pride yourself on, sure, but I do. I have 2 children. We have pets. We've cleaned up all kinds of messes. But sweet holy Moses was that gross. All over her room was the correct terminology. The bed, her pillows, her toys, the wall, the first floor of her dollhouse, even down the hall and in the bathroom, too. I felt so bad for her, y'all. It was her first time experiencing sickness like this, which has got to be a confusing and trying experience for a little one. So my wife and I began cleaning up only to realize that we are at a severe deficiency in the realm of proper cleaning supplies. Now, by this time, it is 10:50 at night, and of course, off to Walmart I go. So I roll up to Walmart, I park, I put on my mask because I am in fact still contagious, and I walk into the store. I get one foot inside the store and have just put my hands onto the handle of a squeaky-wheeled cart when the loudspeaker sounds and a squawky voice says, "Attention customers, our store will be closing in 2 minutes. Yeah. I have just walked into the store, and I have a total of 2 minutes to gather all the needed cleaning supplies on my list. Keep in mind that all I've eaten in the last 3 days is half a can of Campbell's chicken noodle soup, and that the over-counter sleep aid that I had taken previously was starting to take effect. The odds were not in my favor, as the kids say. So I took out my phone, I look at the list, I quickly memorize it because I'm good like that, and I take off with the cart at a brisk jog. I head for the cleaning aisle. I start knocking items off the shelf and into the cart. I'm playing my own personal game of supermarket sweep, and I am winning. Twice an employee tries to nicely tell me that they're about to close, and I straight up ignore them. No response. Don't even slow down. Not because I'm rude, but because my baby needs me and Papa Bear is going to come through for his baby. So finally, I get to my last aisle. I grab the paper towels that I need, and that squawky antagonizer returns once again. Attention customers, our store is now closed. I look up, and a nervous shelf stalker and I lock eyes. Clutching my brawny double pack with a death grip that would make any CrossFitter proud, I ask her, "Are they gonna let me check out?" And she's like, honestly, I'm not sure. They usually start closing down the registers after these announcements are made. Means nothing to me. I'm a man on a mission. I throw that brawny in my car, I whip the cart around, and I head for the checkout line. I'm running and gunning. I mean, I'm on two wheels drifting corners like I'm Vin Diesel. A skinny Vin Diesel, but Vin Diesel. I get to the self-checkout, and they are in fact shutting down the registers. One register off, 2, 3, only 2 left. I am the last person in the store. The attendant sees me coming, and she rolls her eyes. But I am not deterred. Sleepy, yes, but not deterred. You'll have to use that one. It's the only one still on since it's 11:04. I am not offended by her directness. I am sleepy, yes, but I am not offended. I zoom over to the register. I start ringing everything up. I don't even bag it, partly because I don't have the time, and partly because I am too sleepy to trust myself to be able to separate the plastic baggies and open them up. They really should do that for you ahead of time. I got the stuff. I got home. We cleaned everything up. We took care of our daughter. The things that you will do for love. Man, sometimes I feel like parenting is just navigating one tiny crisis after another, and it's been that kind of week for us. I didn't realize it at the time, but back in college, taking care of my drunk friends really was preparing me for parenting. The Lord truly does work in mysterious ways. But I'm okay. My daughter is okay. The sickness has moved from daddy to daughter to mommy now. My wife is currently battling with it, but she's getting better. I'm taking good care of her, and I'm glad to be able to be in the shed with you tonight. All right, enough of that. Let's get to some corrections and comments from last episode. 42 days, Keystone. 21 days, Hanobia. No Bigfoot invites for the show. We're still waiting. How long am I going to keep mentioning this? Until I get an invite. I don't care how long it takes. Frankly, I've got the time. I'll wait. Whenever you're ready, you know how you can reach us. Email the show at, that's right, intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Yeah, get at us. For real. For real, though. On our last episode, I said that Office of Management and Budget nominee Neera Tanden had a record of being hostile with journalists. It turns out it's actually worse than that. I've since learned that Ms. Tanden once literally punched a journalist for having the audacity to ask Hillary Clinton about her Iraq War vote. Last week, we learned another promising real estate opportunity for us here at In the Shed, as a ranch in the Nevada desert bordering Area 51 has come up for sale with a price tag of $4.5 million. It took me a week, but y'all, I did the math. It would only cost us about $75,000 each, and we can own the ranch. Area 52 can become a reality. I'm ready when you are. The balls are on your side of the proverbial net. In our second UFO story last week, we learned of an alien memory medal that the U.S. government has allegedly admitted to experimenting with. I've since been reminded that such a medal matches the exact initial description of the debris recovered in the Roswell incident in 1947, which is very interesting. I've also received feedback wanting to know why I include headlines from less than reputable news sources. As I said on episode 001, our goal here is not to tell you what to think, but instead to give you a snapshot of what all is being said from every side, and then allowing you, the listener, to decide for yourself what it all means. And lastly, On our last show, I asked for your prayers, good vibes, and energy for those in Texas struggling through last week's record winter storm. It's easy to see such a storm as an opportunity to laugh at silly Southerners who don't know how to handle a little cold, but it caught a lot of people by surprise and took quite a toll. As of the time of this recording, the death toll stands at 57 people. That's mothers, fathers, children, neighbors, and some have received power bills for as much as $16,000 for the period of time that they did not have power. This storm was truly no laughing matter, and we continue to ask that you keep our Texas brothers and sisters in your thoughts and your prayers. We do have a couple of listener emails to read again today. Thank you so much for responding and interacting with the show. That's my goal as we build this thing together, not to sit in my shed and give an hour-long monologue, but for this to become a two-way conversation as we continue to get to know each other and learn together. Our first email comes to us from Ryan S. from the great state of Arkansas. Ryan says, I've never heard the theory about the Titanic being sunk on purpose. Thanks for sharing. I'd love to hear more conspiracy theories in the paranormal news segment. Hey Ryan, thanks for writing in. Yeah man, absolutely, you got it. We will definitely cover more conspiracy theories on future episodes. I like Titanic one as well. It's pretty interesting, I agree with you, and we'll keep doing that on the show. Our second email comes to us from Martha P. from Nebraska, the Cornhusker State. And Martha says, never thought I'd call myself a tool, but here we are. I like that, Martha. Thank you. She says, I'm a 67-year-old great-grandmother of 4 who found your show by accident. That's the only way to find the show, Martha. By accident. We have no advertisements. We have no sponsors. And we just recorded the show, and we just put it out there. I'm a little man in Alabama. I'm in a shed, and I just talk, and then I get it out there to you. So thank you for finding me on accident, Martha. Her email goes on. I'm really liking it. Wow. Thank you, Martha. I really do appreciate the kind words. I'm glad to have you in the shed. You are a sharp tool. If you'd like to share your thoughts about one of our stories, or if you have an email that you would like to be read live, you can email the show at, that's right, intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. That's intheshedwithwes, all one word, all lowercase, no spaces, @gmail.com. Okay, enough of that. Let's switch to this. Let's move to the world of politics, and let's hit the headlines. From the American Spectator, Andrew Cuomo's days of wine and roses are over. Russia, ally of Syria, fumes at U.S. airstrikes against militia group, writes the Washington Times. $1.9 trillion coronavirus aid package set to clear House late tonight, according to MarketWatch. From Real Clear Politics, school closures have failed America's children. Saudi Crown Prince approved killing of Khashoggi, U.S. report says. That's from The Guardian. And finally, Biden has found a way to unite the Senate, and that is according to Slate. Our first news story this week, U.S. bombs Syria facilities used by Iran-backed militia, first airstrikes under Biden. U.S. airstrikes targeted bases in Syria used by Iranian militant groups suspected of attacking American and Allied forces in northern Iraq last week, the Pentagon announced late Thursday. The strikes, the first authorized by President Joe Biden, hit multiple targets used by the militia. The Pentagon blames the militias for rocket attacks on a base in northern Iraq that killed a contractor and wounded U.S. and Allied troops. The operation sends an unambiguous message. President Biden will act to protect American and coalition personnel, Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said in a statement. At the same time, we have acted in a deliberate manner that aims to de-escalate the overall situation in both eastern Syria and Iraq. Biden's decision to attack Syria did not appear to signal an intention to widen U.S. military involvement in the region, but rather to demonstrate a will to defend U.S. troops in Iraq. I'm confident in the target that we went after. We know what we hit, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin told reporters flying with him from California to Washington, according to the Associated Press. Speaking shortly after the airstrikes, he added, "We're confident that the target was being used by the same Shia militants that conducted the strikes," referring to a February 15 rocket attack in northern Iraq that killed one civilian and contractor and wounded a U.S. service member and other coalition personnel. Austin said he recommended the action to Biden. "We said a number of times that we will respond on our timeline," Austin said. "We wanted to be sure of the connectivity and we wanted to be sure that we had the right targets." Earlier, Kirby said the U.S. action was a proportionate military response taken together with diplomatic measures including consultation with coalition partners. Republican Senator Marco Rubio also called the strikes proportional and necessary. Not everyone is so supportive. I know I just read a quote there by Marco Rubio who said this was an appropriate response. In response to the strike, Bernie Sanders tweeted, "I am very concerned by last night's strike by U.S. forces in Syria. The president has the responsibility to keep Americans safe, but for too long, administrations of both parties have interpreted their authorities in an extremely expansive way to continue war. This must end." Crystal Ball tweeted, "So when they said $2,000 checks immediately, what they actually meant was $1,400 checks whenever we get to it after bombing Syria and abandoning the minimum wage hike. Good luck in the midterms." Even former Trump staffer George Papadopoulos tweeted about the strike, saying, "What part of Build Back America is associated with bombing Syria?" Now, I know it's in the president's job description to protect Americans, and I know that an American life was lost. But I'm tired, y'all. I'm tired of the military-industrial complex. I'm tired of a war that's old enough that kids who were born when it started are now old enough to enlist in it. I love America. I love my country. There's no place on earth that I'd rather live. I love the freedoms that we have. But do we have to have a military base in every country on the planet? Do we have to bomb brown people all the time? And why is it that we post up in someone else's country for years on end, we flex our muscle, we dictate their government, then when we're attacked, we immediately react with overwhelming force, yet the narrative is always one that highlights the violence and atrocities of the other side? It just seems so disingenuous and it seems unnecessary, man. If we're being honest, and it's hard to do when you're looking at the actions of your own nation, but if we're being honest, there's a hypocrisy here that's unbecoming and more than a bit unsettling. When it comes to war, when it comes to dropping bombs, the truth is there are powerful people who benefit. And Washington isn't straight up with us. I don't know what the proper action to be taken was. I realize that Joe Biden isn't the only president to have launched missile strikes against targets in Syria. I don't envy the decisions that a U.S. president has to make, but I'm tired. And I do know that even Joe Biden himself previously tweeted speaking out against similar actions taken by then President Trump, saying that military action should be a last resort and that we can't continue endless war in the Middle East. I don't know. I agree with past Biden. I disagree with the current one. Look, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're trying to figure this thing out. People have lost jobs and homes and family members. Schools still aren't open. Texas is hurting. If you want to protect the American people, maybe start there. That's all I'm saying. Our next news story in the world of politics: Facebook unfriends Australia. An uproar as news pages go dark. Facebook faced backlash from publishers and politicians on Thursday after blocking news feeds in Australia in a surprise escalation of a dispute with the government over a law to require it to share revenue from news. Facebook wiped out pages from Australian state governments and charities as well as from domestic and international news organizations 3 days before the launch of a nationwide COVID-19 vaccination program. Though the measure was limited to Australia, European publishers along with British and Canadian politicians described it as an attempt to put pressure on governments that might consider similar measures. Facebook's actions to unfriend Australia today, cutting off essential information services on health and emergency services, were as arrogant as they were disappointing, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison wrote on his own Facebook page. These actions will only confirm the concerns that an increasing number of countries are expressing about the behavior of big tech companies who think they are bigger than government and that the rules should not apply to them. Canadian Heritage Minister Stephen Gilabelt, who is drafting legislation to make the platforms pay for using media content, said Facebook's move was highly irresponsible. It won't deter us from moving ahead, he said in remarks to reporters. The dispute centers on a planned Australian law that would require Facebook and Alphabet Inc.'s Google to reach deals to pay news outlets whose links drive traffic to their platforms or agree to a price through arbitration. A Facebook spokeswoman said that CEO Mark Zuckerberg had a constructive call with Australian Treasurer John Friesenberg and again expressed our disappointment with the proposed law. She said Facebook would continue to engage with the governments on amendments to the law. Facebook said it had blocked a wide swath of pages because the draft law did not clearly define news content. It said its commitment to combat misinformation had not changed, and it would restore pages that were taken down by mistake. As the law does not provide clear guidance on the definition of news content, we've taken a broad definition in order to respect the law as drafted, a company spokesperson said. Facebook used its machine learning tools to identify news on the site to enforce the Australian action that blocked everything from news and government websites to its own site in Australia at one point. Yeah. Mark Zuckerberg, we see you, big dog. We see you. We know what this is about. We know what you're doing. How are you going to unfriend an entire country? Have you seen that man drink water? I'm not even trying to make a joke, y'all. Have you seen the man? Remember when Donald Trump picked up that glass of water with two hands like it was an infant and he was afraid to drop it, and he took 2 sips and it was all over every news station for like 3 weeks. Everybody was talking about President Trump don't know how to drink water. Have you seen Mark Zuckerberg drink water? Stop what you're doing. Put your life on hold. Pause everything. Go to the YouTube. Type in Mark Zuckerberg drinks water. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. He probably don't need to drink water because he, in fact, is AI. That's mostly a joke when it comes to him being AI, but what's not a joke is what he's doing here. Australia is trying to pass this law that would make Facebook pay for something, and as we well know, big tech does not pay for anything. They don't pay their fair share of taxes. They don't get charged the same things that other brick and mortar companies do, and partly that's why they've been able to become the giants that they are. They said that they accidentally blocked all these sites, that they took a wide swath because the law did not clearly define and express what was a news station and what wasn't, what was a news report and what wasn't. Come on, man. Like, you know what's news and what's not. You know what to block and what not to. And to do this 3 weeks or a couple weeks out from a big vaccine rollout, that's them flexing their muscles. That's Mark Zuckerberg saying, remove that bill, remove that law, don't pass it. Look what I can do. He's holding something over their head, even in a pandemic. Whether accidental or on purpose, it's a bad look. And I'm not a fan of this. I'm not a fan of big tech getting exceptions that other businesses don't. I'm not a fan of giving them more and more and more and more. I think they need to be reined in a little bit. They shouldn't have as much control as they do. And, if you're blocking news sites, like you're blocking a whole country's worth of news sites, how does that not violate the First Amendment? Now, I know other countries have different rules, different laws, different amounts of free speech, most less than we have. But for real though, Facebook, you can't block news sites. And you can't do it during a pandemic. And really, if we're being truthful, you have no business deciding what people should see and shouldn't see when it comes to news. People are smarter than they're given credit for. Let people read the news stories. Let them decide for themselves. Okay, I'm a little bit fired up tonight. Those first 2 news stories in the world of politics were heavy. So let's move on to a couple that are a little bit lighter. So you think you have it bad during the pandemic? Try this on for size. Wanted man surrenders to police because he couldn't stand the people he was living with in lockdown. True story. A wanted man surrendered to police in West Sussex Wednesday because he didn't want to spend another minute with the people he was living with during the COVID-19 lockdown. Inspector Darren Taylor of the Sussex Police shared the odd occurrence on Twitter, claiming the unidentified man who was wanted on recall to prison was in pursuit of peace and quiet when he turned himself in. One in custody and headed back to prison to serve some further time on his own, Taylor writes. As weird as it may seem that someone would seek out the comforts of a life behind bars, a man named Robert Vick once escaped from a minimum security prison in Kentucky, but turned himself in at a motel a few miles away the very next day because it was too cold outside. On the day Vick surrendered, the temperature in Lexington was 3 degrees below, with a wind chill of 17 below. He was frozen, Maurice King, manager of the Sunset Motel and Restaurant, said. He walked in, knocked on my door, and told me to call the police. Vick was sentenced to 6 years for burglary and possession of a forged instrument. That dude couldn't stand his family. or his friends or his girlfriend or his girlfriend's family, whoever it was he was living with, that man had enough. He would rather two hots in the cot. He was like, hey, these folks are annoying. Like, what in the world were they doing? What was so bad, so awful, so annoying that this man would rather be in prison? Perhaps, and I'm just throwing this out there, this is just my own personal opinion, but perhaps his household had a stomach bug as well. Because during the last 8 days, if you told me, hey, you can avoid all of what is about to happen, but you gotta go. You gotta take a stroll. You gotta go on down to the prison and sit behind those bars. Do you know what my response would be? Roll out my cart. Roll out my cart, 'cause I'm ready. Sometimes prison seems like almost like a good thing. 3 hot meals that you don't have to cook. You don't have to do the dishes. You can sleep as much as you want. It sounds like a parent's paradise. And finally, our last news story this week in the realm of politics, Rafael Edward Cruz. On our last show, I quoted SNL's Weekend Update segment, and I will quote it again tonight. If you hate Ted Cruz, it was a great week. If you love Ted Cruz, you are Ted Cruz. I thought that was a great line. It got cold in Texas. The power went out, and Ted Cruz went with it. Ted Cruz got caught at the airport flying his family to Cancun for a little warmth and relaxation, and people were big mad. For a solid week, Ted Cruz was fixed in the crosshairs of the Twitterverse, people saying that when his constituents needed him the most, he abandoned them, and the sentiment was pretty much universal. Everyone not named Sean Hannity took shots at the Texas senator, and no doubt it was a bad look. And things got worse surprisingly when old Ted opened his mouth and offered an initial defense of himself, seeming to blame the trip on his daughters. And I gotta tell you, that is an approach as a father that I would never take. It would have been slightly better, I think, if he had just been honest with everybody, right? I mean, if he had just said, look, there was no power, it was freezing cold, I've got a family to take care of, and the means to remove them from that situation, so I did so, just as any parent would. Now that they're settled, my team and I are working diligently to help the people of Texas however we can. Wouldn't that have been better? I mean, sure, opponents might still have given him a hard time, but maybe it would have at least helped tamp things down a bit. And I get it. As a parent, I totally understand removing your family from the situations like that if you have the means. I get it. But I also understand people being upset that he left. I mean, 57 people died from exposure in the area that he is supposed to be representing, and he was lounging poolside with a daiquiri in hand. Now, I heard talking heads on the right that said, what was Ted Cruz supposed to do, make it warmer? And, that is a disingenuous argument. Ted Cruz is no Captain Planet, but he certainly could be organizing help. He could be having his team call constituents to check on them, make sure people had blankets and food and sleeping bags. His team could have been working to inform folks and get the word out about warming shelters and places they could go to be safe and to warm up. So I get the outrage, I do. I mean, AOC, and I know the right thinks that she's a four-headed goblin, but AOC, who does not represent Texas, happened to raise $3 million and was actually present in Texas volunteering at a soup kitchen and passing out water bottles. I've heard people on the right question her motives and say that she was only doing so for political gain. But hey, let me break something down for you, all right? When someone is going out of their way to do good for others, maybe just say good job, okay? Maybe just be appreciative for the help and allow that the person doing good is just that, a person, just like those who are struggling, just like those who are cold, just like those who are without food. We can't be so polarized, easy for me to say. We can't be so polarized by politics that even in desperate times, we don't allow other Americans to be unified with us on Team Do Good. So Ted Cruz made a poor decision. He got rocked for it. His initial response was a dud. But I have to say, I have to be fair. To his credit, he did what Donald Trump never did when he was in office. He did what Nancy Pelosi never does. He fessed up. He owned up to it. It took him a minute, but to his credit, he did come around and he admitted that he was wrong. He said that he knew he was wrong when he did it, and he came home to Texas. He got to work trying to help where he could, so kudos to him for that. The lighter side of this whole escapade is that it served as a bit of comedic relief during a tough week, because wrapped up in this whole exploit was a bit of underappreciated comedy. There were some truly funny undercurrents to this story, man. First of all, the sheer irony at play that Ted Cruz, who is an outspoken immigration hardliner, okay? He's been less than understanding in the past when it comes to families crossing the border in order to seek a better life for their family. And yet, what did he do when things got tough for his family for only a few days? That man Speedy Gonzalez across the border with quickness. I'll take lack of self-awareness for 200, please, Alex. Rest in power, big dog. Second, when Ted Cruz got home, his house sounded like this. Olay. Somebody hired a mariachi band to serenade Ted Cruz. Somebody came out their pockets. Somebody broke their bank. Somebody cracked the piggy bank, collected all their coins, and used them to post up a mariachi band outside Ted Cruz's house, talking about some Ted Cruz was brushing his teeth, talking about some Ted Cruz was eating his cereal, talking about some Ted Cruz was taking out the trash, talking about some Ted Cruz was reading a bedtime story. No, his daughters were still in Cancun. But at Ted Cruz's house, it sounded like Now, if that ain't funny, I do not know what is. And third, when old Ted took the stage at CPAC today, he greeted the crowd by saying, "Orlando's great. It's no Cancun, but it is great." That man is silly. Ted Cruz is silly. It's like the more he's attempting to be serious, the more silly he sounds. So Ted Cruz acted unwisely. He took his medicine. He tried to do better. And there was some comedy there too. There really was. By the way, before we leave politics and head on to sports, while we're on the subject of people who are accidentally funny, you ever watch Shepard Smith read the news? There is something so bizarre about the way that man reads the news. It's like every story is read exactly the same with the exact same tone, no matter what the story is about. It's something about his voice, the inflection in his voice. I was flipping channels last night, and I stopped on his show for a few minutes. He was reporting on a story that I'm sure you heard about. It is unquestionably and undeniably not funny. Lady Gaga's dog walker was shot, and 2 of her prized dogs were stolen. Y'all saw that? Not funny. Tragic, in fact. Like, I hope that man is okay. I hope he makes a full recovery. I hope he gets the counseling that he will undoubtedly need. That's a terrifying situation. But when Shepard Smith read that story, hilarious. Hilarious. That man had me rolling. I had to turn it off. I had to repent of my sins. It's his voice, man. It's his voice, man. My man's was like, Lady Gaga's dog walker, shot. Her puppies, stolen. Why has this happened? We'll tell you next. Yo, that was a terrible Shepard Smith impression. I'm going to have to study out. I'll do better. I'm going to do another one in a few weeks, and I'll actually sound like him. Y'all watch. But, dude, that is not a funny story. But the way that man reads it, it is hilarious. Go to the YouTube. Type it in. Look it up. Anyway, that's all for the world of politics this week. Let's move on to the world of sports. Let's hit the headlines. Tiger Woods in good spirits after follow-up procedure. Kevin Durant out with a hamstring injury through the All-Star break. The NFL's minority hiring rate has nearly doubled according to report. Deshaun Watson met with new coach but still wants trade. Indianapolis to relax COVID restrictions before the NCAA tournament. The NCAA has overturned sanctions versus Georgia Tech on appeal. Five-star quarterback prospect Ty Simpson picks Alabama over Clemson and Tennessee. And Deion Sanders' second game as coach at Jackson State has been postponed due to coronavirus positivity. Coronavirus positivity, huh? Man, shoot. That's the one type of positivity that I do not want. I am usually all about positivity, but not that kind. Our first sports story we want to cover this week, the NBA All-Star Game. As we talked about last time, the captains for this year's game are Kevin Durant from the East and LeBron James from the West. But now we know the whole roster. The starters from the East, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Bradley Beal, Joel Embiid, and Kyrie Irving. And from the West, Stephen Curry, Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, and Kawhi Leonard. The reserves from the East are Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, James Harden, Zach LaVine, Julius Randle, Ben Simmons, Nikola Vucevic, and Domantas Sabonis. And from the West, Paul George, Rudy Gobert, Damian Lillard, Donovan Mitchell, Chris Paul, Zion Williamson, and Devin Booker. The East will be coached by Doc Rivers, and the West will be coached by Quinn Snyder of the Jazz. Now, every year when we talk about the NBA All-Star Game, there's one topic that gets covered on every sports show, so I thought we would take our stab at it, All-Star snubs. So when the All-Star roster gets announced and they start talking about the reserves, usually the debate begins. People start talking about folks that got left out, players that should have made the All-Star game that didn't, guys that are playing that maybe shouldn't and don't deserve their spot. And this year, I got to tell you, in looking at the rosters from top to bottom, the team captains, the starters, the reserves, there's really only one name that's worth mentioning. There is an All-Star snub here, but just one. Just one snub. You've heard a lot of names named, but the one guy, the one player that got left out that should have made the All-Star game, Trae Young. Ice Trae. Trae Young, who is averaging 27.5 points and 9.5 assists a game. Trae Young, who is 9th in the league in scoring and 3rd in the NBA in assists. Trae Young, who was an All-Star last season. Trae Young, who plays for the team in the host city. How in the world is Trae Young not an All-Star? How do you leave Trae Young out of the All-Star game in Atlanta? Now, when you start talking about somebody who is left out, somebody who got snubbed, somebody who deserves to be in the game, the question always comes up, well, if you're going to put him in, who do you take out? You can't just say someone was snubbed. You have to say that they deserve to be there more than someone else. Yeah. Trae Young deserves to be in that game more than several guys from the East. How about one of the two Celtics players, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown? How in the world do the Boston Celtics, one of the most disappointing and underperforming teams this season, how did they get two All-Stars and Trae Young not make it? He deserves it more than either of those guys. How about Vucevic from the Magic, or even Sabonis from the Pacers? Name 5 point guards in the NBA better than Trae Young. I'll wait. He unfairly gets compared to Luka Doncic because they were traded for each other on draft night. People always give Luka the benefit of the doubt, but Trae Young is a good player. As good a scorer, as good a deep shooter he is, his best asset is his passing. He whips the ball around. He finds the open man. He's unselfish. He plays with passion, with fire, with joy. He's fun to watch. He's a fan favorite. And that man should be in the All-Star game. Like, for real. I'm not Stephen A. Smith. I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to shout. I'm not going to yell. No hyperbole here. No outrage machine here. But you done messed up, A.A. Ron. You done messed up. By the way, side note, doesn't Domantas Sabonis look like a 6'10" Lord Farquaad from Shrek? I was just watching the Pacers play the other night, and that man was at the free throw line, and they zoomed in on his face, and I was like, yo, that's Lord Farquaad. I don't mean that as a slight to Mr. Sabonis. I'm sure he's a nice fella. He's a heck of a player, but he ain't better than Trae Young. He don't deserve a spot more than Trae Young. And he just so happens to look like a 6'10" Lord Farquaad. Our last story in the world of sports. Are Russell Wilson's days in Seattle numbered? If you're a Seahawks fan, things are getting dicey. We first talked about this a couple weeks ago, and now it's looking more and more likely that the Seahawks are going to move on and separate from Russell Wilson. And I'm here to tell you, if the Seahawks trade Russell Wilson, if they let this happen, they are crazy. They're crazy. At worst, Russell Wilson is the fourth best quarterback in the league. At worst, he's the fourth best. You could say Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, and Pat Mahomes. Those three guys might be better quarterbacks today than Russell Wilson. But that's it. That's the whole list. Russell Wilson is just tired, man. He's tired of being sacked. He's tired of being hit. He's tired of not being protected. That man has been sacked at least 40 times for 8 straight seasons. He's on pace to be the quarterback that is sacked the most in all of history during his career. Now, I know Pete Carroll likes to do things his own way. I know he likes to play defense and run the football, but that man ought to go hat in hand to Russell Wilson and do anything and everything that he can to make things right. Before Russell Wilson got there, Pete Carroll did not have very much success in the NFL. Not very much success with the Seattle Seahawks. He was one more bad season away from losing his job. And he has a reputation of being a player's coach all the way back to his days at USC, a very relational coach, a coach that likes to keep things light. But that relationship has soured. And honestly, things might be a whole lot worse than they even appear. Because how in the world does Russell Wilson go back to his team as team captain, as team leader, after throwing his entire offensive line under the bus? He did rounds of interviews, and he didn't mince words, and he wasn't wrong. But how can you go back? And it came out yesterday. Yesterday, his agent said, well, Russell Wilson has not asked to be traded, but if he was traded, he would want to go to one of these 4 teams. If he was traded, he would want to go to either New Orleans, Dallas, Chicago, or Las Vegas. Now, if Russell Wilson went to the Saints, if they traded him to the Saints, that's an instant Super Bowl contender. They already had a solid defense. They have weapons on offense. If they had a dynamic quarterback and a leader like Russell Wilson, they would be Super Bowl contenders from the jump. It would be another add water and mix situation. It would be sort of like the move that Tom Brady made in going to Tampa last offseason. But is Drew Brees even retiring? Word has come out as soon as the season ended that last season would be Drew Brees' last. That's the speculation, at least. That's what the reports are. The team has already changed his pay scale and kind of lowered it to the veteran minimum. So if he did come back, if he did play next year, he would only be making $1 million. Is Drew Brees at his age, with his decline in play, is he going to come back? He doesn't throw the deep ball well. Is he going to come back and play for $1 million a year? Word is that he's going to announce anytime now that he's retiring, but I got to say, it does make me wonder. It does make me wonder that maybe if the team lowering his salary that way might not just be a, hey, we appreciate you, but it's time. Maybe it's the Saints' way of saying to their star quarterback, we appreciate all you've done. We don't want this to be embarrassing for you, but it's probably time to hang him up. Russell Wilson in New Orleans would be quite interesting. Please, though, Russ, Sierra, you need to step in because Russ, listen to me. For the love of all that is holy, please do not become a Dallas Cowboy. I have nothing against the Cowboys. I'm not a Cowboy hater. I'm not a Jerry Jones hater. But I do not want to see Russell Wilson with the Cowboys. The Cowboys need to just step up and pay Dak. I don't want to have to hear about Jerry Jones and Russell Wilson every single time I flip on the TV. Every time I watch ESPN, they talk about the Cowboys enough. And the Cowboys have been sorry. They've been sorry and they still get talked about. Please, Russ, do not go to the Cowboys. I have no idea why Chicago is on Russell Wilson's list. It's windy, it's cold, and they suck. But he put them on the list probably because they have a good defense, they have an offensive-minded coach. And what are we left with? The Raiders. The Las Vegas Raiders. We mentioned on our show a couple weeks ago when we talked about this story, we said if he were to be traded, the team to look out for would be the Raiders. I don't know, something about John Gruden and Russell Wilson together makes a lot of sense. John Gruden has praised Russell Wilson more than almost any other quarterback when he was in the announcing booth. He's going to be there for the foreseeable future when he signed a 10-year, $100 million contract. And it would be a lot of fun to see Russell Wilson and Josh Jacobs. It'd be a lot of fun. So, Russ, if you do get traded, if you do go to another team, please, please, please don't go to the Cowboys. Don't waste your time in the Windy City. And even though you might have a chance at a Super Bowl in New Orleans, it would be a whole lot more fun to see you in a Raider helmet. And if you're Seattle, what in the world are you doing? What in the world are you doing? The only reason you have a Super Bowl, the Legion of Boom was important, yes, but the reason you have a Super Bowl is because you had a great quarterback on an even better contract. If you really want to do better, if you want to be a Super Bowl contender again, what you need to do is build around Russ. Not get rid of him, not ship him off, not underappreciate him, not misuse him, not waste his talent, not protect him, but build around him. Get that man an offensive line. Spend some money. Do whatever you have to do to mend that relationship because you're not going to find a better quarterback than Russell Wilson. And that's all for sports. Let's switch to the world of the paranormal. Our first story in the world of the paranormal comes to us from the woods of Texas. Deer caught eating human remains for first time, say scientists. I repeat, deer caught eating human remains for first time, says scientists. Scientists have discovered the first instance of a deer which eats human remains. The animal was caught mid-feast by a motion-sensitive camera at the Forensic Anthropology Research Facility at Texas State University, a 26-acre area where forensic scientists study how human bodies decompose in the wild. Wait, say what? They study how human bodies decompose in the wild? Now, how do you study how human bodies decompose? Is this what happens when people donate their bodies to science? Because I thought that meant you were an organ donor and they took your eyeballs and gave them to somebody that couldn't see you. They took stuff from you that other people could use. I ain't never heard of nobody donating their body to science and then having their body left out in the field so scientists could study how bodies decompose. That's some freaky stuff right there. Scientists also monitor how animals interact with the bodies, but the reaction from the white-tailed deer was an unexpected crunch point. That's a weird way to say that, crunch point. Yo. Deer are mostly herbivores, although they have been known to scavenge small mammals or birds and occasionally eat other meats. They be eating other meats. They be going to Arby's. They be getting that roast beef shawty. That hot ham and cheese shawty. I didn't know that deer ate other animals, like ever. I thought they just ate the plants. Bambi has misled me. As documented in the Journal of Forensic Scientists, the experts explained that the animal captured on camera was the first known photographic evidence of deer gnawing human remains. Imagine that being your discovery. You're a scientist. You make a discovery for the very first time, and people are like, yo, you made a discovery? What did you discover, scientist? Did you find a cure for cancer? No, not. Did you cure the coronavirus? No, blindness? No. Alzheimer's? No, I discovered that a deer a deer will eat human flesh in certain circumstances. Army Hammer. The deer was scavenging when it came across the decomposing body, which had already been feasted on by vultures. Experts watched as the animal held the bone in its mouth like a cigar on 2 occasions. Wow, 2 occasions. The deer came back. He was like, yo, this human meat is yummy. I want seconds. Experts estimated that the deer was chewing dry bone rather than eating soft tissue. Deer gnaw on bones of other non-human animals to possibly obtain minerals absent in their diet, including phosphorus, calcium, and sodium during the winter months. For forensic scientists, the study was not solely to analyze animal behavior, but also the marks left on the bone by the deer, which is useful for future reference. How is that useful for future reference? In the future, are we going to need to know what marks are left on bones of humans after being chewed? Because that is weird and creepy, and I am not comfortable with it. And I'm whispering again, because on this show, sometimes I like to whisper. It's easier on my voice, and it's entertaining. That's creepy. That's creepy for real. You sitting there studying bodies decomposing, you got it pulled up on a little screen, you watching the camera, and then here come little Bambi out of a clearing. And you're like, ooh, Bambi pretty. That's a pretty deer. And then he walk over, and he bite the human. Yo, that's crazy. From the woods of Texas, we go to Nevada for more bad news. Nevada wants to let tech companies form their own governments. Does that sound like a good idea to anybody? Steve Sisolak, the Democratic governor of Nevada, who also has a weird name, wants to incentivize technology companies to move to his state, and he's got some wild ideas about how to make that happen. The latest draft proposal obtained by the Review Journal doesn't just hand out the typical tax breaks that you'd expect from a governor. The proposed idea includes provisions that would allow companies to form their own local governments. The proposed law, which hasn't been fully formed, introduced to the Nevada legislature, would establish a so-called innovation zone that would only be open to technology companies who can meet minimum capital requirements. In other words, if you pay, you can make your own rules, which doesn't seem fair and is terrifying. Tech companies that wanted to set up shop in the innovation zone would need to have at least $250 million and plan to invest at least $1 billion over the next decade, according to the Review Journal. Nevada wouldn't just accept any tech company either. The proposed law lists just 8 types of tech company that would be allowed to set up an innovation zone. Blockchain, that's some Bitcoin stuff. Autonomous technology, self-driving cars. Internet of Things, don't know. Robotics, AI. Artificial intelligence, also AI. Wireless technology, that thing that Elon Musk want to put in your brain. And biometrics, which is like ESPN sports science type stuff. Oh, also renewable resource technology, which is just words that don't mean much. What's in it for the company that chooses to move to one of these innovation zones, you ask? Yes, I do ask that. Well, they get special tax breaks, of course, which are pretty typical for this type of endeavor. But they'd also get to set up their own local government, complete with a 3-member board of supervisors, and any local ordinances adopted by that board would supersede the rules of the county in which their innovation zone was placed. Their rules would supersede the rules of any county in which their innovation zone was placed? That's insane. That's crazy. That makes absolutely no sense that they would allow that. The article goes on to say it's all right there in the draft legislation. The adoption of any ordinance by the Board of Supervisors supersedes any ordinance on the subject adopted by the Board of County Commissioners of the county in which the innovation zone is located. Allowing companies to create their own governments that supersede the laws and regulations created by politicians who are voted in by residents seems terrifying and dystopian, to say the least. The new Board of Supervisors would also be allowed to create a judicial court, and 3 members would even be able to establish their own district attorney, county clerk, and sheriff. Companies like Facebook already have enormous private security, but this really takes things to the next level. What are the companies not allowed to do? Well, they can't create a sales tax, according to the draft law, and they can't levy property taxes. Strangely, after a period of time, the hypothetical techno-town would be allowed to tax fuel. Needless to say, this entire situation would be an absolute nightmare, and the only silver lining that we can see at the moment is that this proposed law is still in the drafting stage. it's not too late for the governor to heavily revise the proposal or to tear it up completely and toss it in the garbage. I vote for that one. I vote wad it up, throw it away, and start from scratch. And also, people of Nevada, possibly, and I'm just floating this idea out there, possibly find a new governor. Because that junk is not a good idea. And that is scary. It sounds like you're giving them exception to the law. They get to make their own laws, have their own judges, their own sheriff, and we will be screwed. AI will take over. Only Elon Musk and that weird, water-drinking Zuckerberg and all of their merry men will have say-so. So while we do have say-so, let us say so. No. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. And do not let tech companies form their own governments. Yikes. From Nevada, we go to the air over New Mexico. Pilot reports UFO, says missile-like object flew over plane during flight to Phoenix. A pilot on a Phoenix-bound American Airlines flight radioed that an unidentified flying object flew over the plane in New Mexico on Sunday, as in this last Sunday. At approximately 1:19 p.m. Central Standard Time, the pilot of American Airlines Flight 2292 from Cincinnati reported, "Do you have any targets up here? We just had something go right over the top of us," according to a radio transmission recorded by a blogger, Steve Douglas, and updated on Douglas's blog, Deep Black Horizon. Shout out to Douglas. At that time, the aircraft was over the northeast corner of New Mexico. I hate to say this, looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast. It went right over the top of us, the pilot said in a radio transmission. Douglas said he was trying to find if he had recorded a mayday call from another aircraft whose engines caught fire after taking off from the Denver airport when he heard the pilot. It was a pure coincidence, Douglas told the Associated Press. I was just as surprised as everybody else was. Following a debrief with our flight crew and additional information received, we can confirm this radio transmission was from American Airlines Flight 2292 on February 21st, according to a statement from American Airlines. The Federal Aviation Administration air traffic controllers didn't see any object in the area on their radar, according to a statement from FAA spokesperson Ian Greger. Could it have been a missile? Scott Stearns, Director of Public Affairs at White Sands Missile Range, located in southern New Mexico, said the range conducted no tests on Sunday and that we never test in that area. White Sands Missile Range is the U.S. Department of Defense's largest fully instrumental open-air range, according to the range's website. Stearns said that he also communicated with the Holloman Air Force Base, which is also located in the southern area of New Mexico, and they have nothing at all going on up there either. A Holloman Air Force Base spokesperson told the Republic they would look into the issue but did not respond in time for publication. Originally established in 1942, the Holloman Air Force Base is home to the world's longest and fastest test track, according to the base's website. The FBI in New Mexico did not immediately respond to a request for comment. So, we just supposed to take the Air Force's word? Because I can think of something that happened in New Mexico, and the Air Force told us then that it was a weather balloon. And we now know it was not a weather balloon. We don't know what it was, but it was in the sky, and it was unidentified, and it was not a weather balloon. And so now they're like, well, we weren't firing any missiles, and we weren't doing any tests, and nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. Strange. But if a pilot, somebody who does this for a living, is like, hey, something went right over us, that seems pretty credible to me. That seems pretty credible. So I'm not saying it was aliens, but I am saying there's a chance. And for our last story in the world of the paranormal, we go back to Texas and the interwebs. Fake snow? Conspiracy theory claims Texas weather government generated. The U.S. is continuing its recovery after being hit by Winter Storm Uri last week. I did not know that the storm had a name, but apparently its name is Uri, capital U-R-I, so that's news to me. With heavy snowfall seen across much of the country and the state of Texas, suffering power outages, rolling blackouts, and damage to its water infrastructure as far south as Houston. An estimated 4.3 million homes were without electricity, heating, and secure drinking water at the peak of the crisis as Joe Biden administration issued a major disaster declaration and was forced to dispatch federal aid. Hey, yo, I'm just saying, I love Texas, and I've already said, praying for Texas. Do anything you can to help the folks in Texas. What happened in Texas is serious. But on a side note, why is it that when Texas loses power and does not have clean drinking water, the Biden administration declares it a state of emergency, and yet Flint, Michigan still does not have clean drinking water in all of it, and we have yet to fix it? Just saying. I ain't saying, but I'm saying. At least 58 people died, and a political furor erupted when it emerged that the state's Republican Senator Ted Cruz had chosen the moment to go on a family vacation to the sunny Mexican beach resort of Cancun rather than support his constituents. But one of the stranger responses to the disaster was the spread of viral conspiracy theory videos on TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter claiming that the severe snow was actually fake and government-generated as part of a sinister plot initiated by shadowy elites, presumably intentionally plunging Texas into its present state of chaos. Hey man, this goes out to our government and Bill Gates. Thank you, Bill Gates, for trying to trick us that this is real snow, a man said in one video as he holds a cigarette lighter to a snowball over his bathroom trash can. You'll see it's not melting, it's going to burn. Snow don't burn. Snow melts. No water, no dripping, no nothing. If I put this stuff in the microwave, it's going to start sparking because there's metal inside it. In another clip, a girl gathers a snowball from her lawn and holds it over a tea light candle, observing the same phenomenon. Do 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 do. Phenomena. Do 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 do. Phenomena. Do 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 da da da. The snow doesn't appear to melt, but is charred black by the flame. A number of other videos have cropped up on the same platform with titles like Need Some Explaining and Anyone Play with the Government-Generated Snow Yet? The same doubts have actually risen before when snow unexpectedly blanketed Atlanta, Georgia in February of 2014, prompting science writer Phil Plait of Slate to debunk them. As the snow melts, the remaining snow absorbs the water. That's why it doesn't appear to drip. The snowball becomes a slush ball, he explained, alluding to the process of sublimation, by which moisture lost from snow disappears as a vapor, a gas, and not through the dripping water, a liquid. Lots of people made videos showing the snowballs not dripping, so it looks like it's not actually melting. But this is a classic case of confirmation bias. Or is it? They only tested this part way. They didn't finish the test by letting the snowball actually melt. As for the charring, Mr. Plait said, the black scorch marks are actually from the lighters themselves. Butane is a hydrocarbon, a molecule made up of carbon and hydrogen. When you burn it, the molecule reacts with oxygen in the air, breaking the bonds between atoms and reforming new molecules. If the burning were perfect, all you'd have left is carbon dioxide and water. But the burning is never completely perfect, and you get other stuff too. One thing that happens is that some of the carbon molecules reform into long chains, creating what we call soot. It's that stuff that's collecting on the snowball, not material from the snow itself. His assessment was endorsed on Friday by Tandy Grubbs, professor and chair of the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry at Stetson University, and someone with a name that is hilarious. Firstly, I would note that the demonstrator did not hold the lighter under the snowball long enough to melt enough of the snow to potentially see water formation. The formation of black on the snow when the lighter is held under it is due to the incomplete combustion and formation of soot when the lighter fuel is burning. Soot would ordinarily not be visible when a lighter is burning in open air, but the snowball in this case is acting like a filter, catching and accumulating the black soot particles, which show up quite visibly on the white snow after a few seconds of exposure. As for why the U.S. government might want to turn a winter storm against its own people, assuming it could, Facebook conspiracy theorist Scott Biddle believes it is a ploy by the new president to stop Texas from seceding from the Union. You got to stop those Texans because they're seceding. and they're going to Cancun. And when they get there, what they will hear is this. Olay. Joe Biden's dark winter statement was not a random thought, it was a foreshadow of what was to come, the conspiracy writer wrote on his Facebook post. Texas is the only state to have its own entirely independent electric grid separate from the rest of the United States. This is warfare, an attack on Texas by altering the jet stream, seeding the clouds, and ultimately causing the storm that blacked out over 4 million people. Sounds crazy? Too hard to believe? Believe it. Why punish Texas? Texas can and will secede from the United States within the next several years. They're in the process now and have been moving toward that direction. The videos have invited plenty of ridicule, with one commentator mocking a girl for testing a snowball with a hairdryer by saying, holding a piece of ice over an electrical device may be just slightly dumber than voting for one guy named Ted Cruz. While this might be a reasonably harmless example of an absurd conspiracy theory gaining traction online, the spread of misinformation as entertainment has had worrying consequences in recent years. But don't you worry, Tools. You stick with us. You come hang out in the shed, and we'll break it all down for you. We'll tell you what's really going on. We'll let you know what's important. We'll let you know what everybody's saying about everything, and we'll let you decide. Was it really snow? Or was it a government conspiracy? You decide, my Tools. Let us know what you think by emailing the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Before signing off tonight, I wanted to share a story with you that I teased on last week's show. One thing that I will do from time to time during this segment of our show is I will share some of my paranormal stories with you. And tonight, I want to tell you about the time that your boy saw an angel. That's right. I was touched by an angel. So I was in 6th grade at the time. Another middle school story for you. And one night, I was going to sleep in my room, and I had been watching scary movies, and I was in one of those moods where you're kind of terrified to close your eyes. You're worried about things going bump in the night, things you can't see. I was anxious. My hands were clammy. There was vomit on my sweater already. Mom's spaghetti. I'm just kidding. Y'all know the reference there. I was in my room. It was dark. It was late. I was trying to go to sleep. Now, my room was on the opposite end of the house from every other person in my family, so I was kind of alone. And I woke up after finally falling asleep. I woke up in a fright, in a cold sweat. I was terrified of what I don't know, but I was scared. And when you're a little kid, when you're a little boy, and you're scared, and you wake up like that, what's the first thing that you do? You want to call out for one of your parents. And so I started to call out for my dad because I could hear that in the next room, the living room, the TV was still on. And I thought maybe he was up late watching a basketball game, as he often did. And so I called out, "Dad!" Sure enough, a few seconds later, I see a figure that I presume to be my dad standing in the doorway of my room. It's only as the figure got to the foot of my bed that I came to the realization that it was not my dad. And if I was scared before, I was terrified now. The amount of time that I was terrified only lasted a fraction of a second as the figure that was at the foot of my bed moved over me. I say over because it didn't walk so much as float or fly or pass, but it came from the foot of the bed and it went right over me and vanished into thin air. And at that moment, I went from being terrified to instantaneous peace. I went from being afraid to being calm. I went from being anxious to being in a state of bliss. I don't know what I saw. I don't know how to describe it to you. All I can say is that I was afraid. I called out for my dad, and something or someone showed up at the foot of my bed to comfort me in my time of need, to calm me down as it went over me and disappeared. In that moment, for whatever reason, I had a certainty in my young mind that I had just experienced an angel. I do believe that angels are real. I do believe that God sends them to watch over us and to comfort us. And in that night, I was in need of being watched over and being comforted. And I had an experience that was exhilarating, that was unexplainable, and in which I believe I saw an angel. That's all for this week. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I can't either. It's back in the house and out of the shed for me. Thanks again for listening to episode 006. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, and review. It really does help. If you have any paranormal experiences, opinions about sports, or politics that you'd like to share, you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. I might even read it on air. Look for us on Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Tune in again next week when we'll hit the headlines, take a deep dive into the wild, wacky life of Tommy Tuberville, and we'll investigate together whether or not vampires are real. This has been In the Shed with Wes Anderson, the best news show in the land covering politics, sports, and the paranormal. Have an adventurous and fulfilling weekend. I'll catch you tools later. Peace out, Boy Scout. Meemaw, we made it!